This is David Dahl on behalf of AM 960, The Patriot, here for the Seth Leibson Show at the House Natural Resources Field Committee hearing on critical minerals and American supply chains. Representatives here today are Paul Gosar of Arizona's 9th, chairman of this committee, Vice Chair Mike Collins of Georgia's 10th Congressional District, Eli Crane of Arizona's 2nd, Debbie Lesko of Arizona's 8th, and Juan Ciscomani of Arizona's 6th. Also in attendance was Andy Biggs of Arizona's 5th. We'll be here with Congressman Gosar in a moment, chair of this committee. Chairman Gosar, glad to have you on here on the Seth Leibson Show. I'm David Dahl here. What's the most important message that you wanted to get out with this hearing? And most importantly, what can our listeners do about it as well?
Well, the biggest thing that we wanted to come out of this hearing is to show Arizonans, not Americans, just Arizonans, how important that critical minerals are to our economy and how we can get it started here, get this total upheaval of utilizing these and mining and taking care of and replenishing. All those different things will be built into this process. So it's trying to get the Arizona folks inundated with why do we want to do this for.
Was there anything that wasn't discussed today that you did want to talk about that maybe our listeners would be interested in hearing about?
Well, I think a lot of things that when we ask a question, we have to be very careful because when we're polling people, you have to be very fair with them when you ask those questions.
Yeah.
So I think that, like, for example, when the Sierra Club took a pulse on Arizonans in regards to nuclear energy, they did not ask a very good question.
Okay.
But when we asked the question, we got an 87% response to our ability. It's basically saying that people would stop and think about having the ability to dictate and have baseload power with the tip of their fingers.
So there is the county, state, and local. There's the good old homeboy effect, you might say. Yeah. There are a lot of geopolitical tensions with China right now. In particular, there is talk of a red Chinese invasion of the Republic of China and Taiwan. As mentioned previously, 87% of our critical mineral infrastructure supply chain is coming from international markets in China. Were that conflict to arise, what do you see the effects being in the American domestic side?
It could be completely cataclysmic. When you look at how much we rely on drugs, we really have only a 2-week supply, really, in real life. And so it would be cataclysmic because they could shut us off. All new technology would be shut down. The same thing with all new healthcare aspects. All those problems could be exacerbated big time.
I remember in 2020 there was and 21, because of the coronavirus pandemic, there was the chip shortage and directly out of Taiwan. Would something similar happen with regards to the electric vehicle batteries, putting a strain on the domestic automobile manufacturing?
We definitely could, because now what you're looking at the chief ingredient is lithium. Mm-hmm. Now, Arizona is not void of lithium. We just had a big discovery here between Wikiup and Mojave County. So why wouldn't we want to try to make this all work for everybody? With good paying jobs, money stays in to the local area. It turns, it helps with our school systems, people that are able to buy things. What's so wrong with that economy that actually works?
Keeping on China, we've heard it said that China's race to space is related to mineral rights. I'm coming from Brandon Weichert's Winning Space book. Mm-hmm. Supposedly there are vast quantities of minerals in space. The scope of the hearing was, of course, about access to minerals in the southwestern United States. But what are we doing to get ahead of the game when it comes to China's attacking of mineral rights in space?
Well, Dave Rickin, Senator for Resolution Copper, a lot of the mining is going to be done at 7,000 feet and lower.
Okay.
So what ends up happening is very hot, very humid, very hot, untenable conditions. So they're actually building robots that will actually do this. So what that robot will do is it's connected to a miner, the miners of tomorrow. What if you were to think outside the box and all of a sudden you were to put some type of a space lab into space, and then you actually had a rover unit that actually got onto a meteor and started mining some of these things? The ideas are endless about what you could do, how you could do it, and it wouldn't be very far-fetched. You could probably do that something like next week.
Congresswoman Lesko, could I have a moment of your time?
Sure.
It's David Dahl with the Seth Leibson Show.
That's great.
We just have a few questions, and we'll try to include this in our show today. Yeah.
Okay.
So is the growing push for electric vehicle dominance of the new automobile market, particularly in states like California, where they have Democratic governors, where they are, you might say, bullying and mandating the manufacture of new vehicles to be strictly electric vehicles by the 2030s, is it causing an undue strain on the American mineral supply chain? And if so, how can we meet the demands of a growing consumer society who wants to own electric vehicles while also going through this supply chain crisis?
Yeah, I do not support mandating the use and buying of electric vehicles as the Biden administration and Democrat states do. And one of the reasons is I'm against mandates. If people want to choose to buy an electric vehicle, they should. The problem is we already have concerns about electric grid reliability. And if we add more demand onto the electric grid without allowing U.S. mining for the critical minerals that are needed to produce electric vehicles and the lithium-ion batteries that are used in electric vehicles, we will just become more and more reliant on China. So basically, when the Biden administration is mandating the use of more electric vehicles, more solar panels, more wind turbines that use critical minerals that are primarily made and produced and refined in China, we are just helping China, not the U.S.
So I have a follow-up question then. You recently introduced legislation into the Congress proposing uranium to be added to the critical mineral list. Is there a nuclear energy alternative here? I've heard it said that nuclear is the most clean form of energy. They said that if all of our energy uses of the last century was taken in the form of nuclear waste, it might fill up a space as small as a small warehouse. Is there a nuclear alternative here, according to your legislation, that might alleviate some of the growing strain on the system?
We actually have bipartisan support for nuclear energy because the Democrats are now joining Republicans in realizing that nuclear energy is baseload, constant energy that's clean. The problem is that 40 to 50% of all the uranium, which is the nuclear fuel needed to power our nuclear plants, comes from Russia. And that's a problem since Russia is our adversary. And so I call on the Biden administration to free up U.S. mining of our critical minerals, including uranium, and that's why I sponsored legislation to add uranium to the critical minerals list so that we can get faster permitting on uranium mines here in the United States and throughout, quite frankly, Arizona has uranium as well.
I also asked your colleague, Chairman Gosar, this, but I'll ask you as well. Could a coming conflict between the Republic of Taiwan and China and Red China cause a strain on the system as well? And what do you see the implications of that being? I recall back in 20 and 21, during the coronavirus pandemic, there was a rapid shortage of electronic chips for vehicles. Could a shortage like this, because China produces 87% of the critical minerals that we have right now from the international trade, could that conflict escalate, cause mass shortages again in production of new electric vehicles?
There's a real threat that China is going to take over Taiwan in the near future. And because of that threat, I am very pleased that the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, TSMC, is constructing a new semiconductor plant in my district in North Phoenix. Because right now TSMC produces a lot of advanced semiconductor chips. And if China takes over Taiwan, then we will be even more reliant on China. And so, again, it's very important for the Biden administration to work with Republicans to open up mining in the United States of critical minerals so that we can supply the needs we need for our semiconductors and for our electricity and other energy uses.
Perfect, yeah. Well, I don't mean to keep you. I've already asked you 3 questions. I do appreciate it. And we'll have you on the show later today live as well.
We're talking about COVID.
Yeah.
All right.
Congressman Crane, can I steal you for a minute?
Yeah.
I'm with AM 960, The Patriot, here on behalf of the Seth Leibson Show. My name's David Dahl. I just have a few questions if you have a moment. We'll be airing the show later this afternoon. I wanted to grab some audio if I could. So this month, the Biden administration recently announced an investment of $32 million to supposedly strengthen the mineral supply chains in America, much of which has been funded with the express intention of supporting creation of clean energy technology from coal and coal byproducts in energy communities, as they say. With an estimated 250 billion tons of coal reserves in the country, is Secretary Granholm's mission to build, as she describes, a healthier community in America, misguided in her intentions, perhaps?
Yeah, well, I think if you were paying attention to some of the witnesses today, they were saying this isn't a problem that you can just throw money at and be okay. When you go and talk about these individuals who are from the mining industry, who work in the mining industry, they'll tell you that the differences in policy between the administrations prior to this one are night and day. And it almost seems as if there's been a war declared on the critical mineral industry, just like there has been on gas and oil. And clearly the implications are very dangerous and severe, not only for our economy, but also our national security, and even for, I would even say, conservation and pollution as well, because we still have to use all of these critical minerals that the consumers of this country use in our phones, our computers, our microwaves, even in our Department of Defense, all the weapon systems we have. But the little secret that nobody wants to talk about is we just buy them from other countries that are often adversaries of ours that don't care about human rights and they don't care about the environment. And so you have these massive issues of us, that come along with us not harvesting and using our own resources wisely. And anybody in this room that was here today, all the experts, they were all parroting the same thing. And I think it's also extremely loud to notice that there wasn't one Democrat that showed up for this hearing today. That should tell you what you need to know about this administration and their policies when it comes to using our natural resources. They can't be bothered to hear what not only the people that said, their concerns in the room today, but what experts who work in the industry are saying.
Certainly. Well, if the Biden administration continues to withdraw access to federal land for critical mineral mining,
right,
what is the recent investment of $32 million actually going to do to strengthen the mineral supply chain if such an investment is too small to be able to cause for new mining, based on Mr. Wheata's testimony today?
Well, I think you heard from many companies that were represented here today saying, I think Resolution Copper was saying that they had invested $75 million in one of their mines as well. And I think, often you look at free market system and capitalism in general, if these companies can't operate here, they'll go overseas. They'll find a way to do business because that's what they're in business to do, is to make money. And so at the end of the day, I think a lot of the restrictions that we're seeing from the Biden administration and just, here or there trying to throw a couple $1 million at the problem clearly isn't working. And I think it's going to, like I said in my last answer, it's going to be very dangerous to our economy, our national security, and to our environment.
So we find more of a free market solution.
100%. Thank you, man. I appreciate
Of course.
it.
I'm David Dahl with the Seth Leibson Show. It airs on 960 AM The Patriot here locally. Just had a few questions I've been asking some of your colleagues on this committee as well. We mentioned H.R. 1 today. What sort of piece of legislation proposed or perhaps not yet realized could be crucial to what we're talking about today, particularly as it relates to permit reform?
Well, I think that one of the biggest pieces of legislation that's laying out there right now is the RAINS Act. And it's actually been proposed, and it's been passed out of the House several times over the last few Congresses. But that REINS Act does exactly what it says in the name. It reins in these federal agencies who are out there just out of control, that really don't care about anything about what the public has to input or say. They're just doing virtually whatever they want. And so if we could get that passed and get it signed, then you're going to see, as a matter of fact, you're not only going to see a lot of these agencies being reeled in, but you're going to see people start bringing their businesses back from China, some of the private industry, which is what we need.
Well, that touches on another subject that I've actually asked a few of your colleagues about. We see growing tensions in China right now, particularly with the Republic of China in Taiwan and Red China on the mainland. What would a proposed conflict or escalation of hostilities result in when it comes to the infrastructure? Because, as we mentioned here at the conference today, 87% of our critical minerals are coming from international trade with China right now. If such a conflict arose, what do you foresee is happening? I remember in 20 and 21 we had a critical chip shortage in the production of new vehicles.
You not only had, and that'll happen again, especially if China invaded Taiwan. And you take Taiwan, for instance, now they're being threatened by China to not get critical minerals because of their wanting to be independent. And I think that's just another reason that the United States needs to go back to being our own. I'm a firm believer in America first. I'm an American first representative. But having said that, I think that Taiwan is very critical to the United States, and that is from that semiconductor standpoint. You don't have to look any further back than that pandemic to see what happened. I'm in the trucking industry by trade, own a trucking company. We couldn't get equipment. We couldn't get trucks to replace the older equipment because of the semiconductor problem. And that's in every industry, not just the trucking industry. Anything you think of has a semiconductor and chips in it. So China invading Taiwan would be a very, very bad thing and a bad day on all of us until we get better situated on simple things like our critical minerals here in the United States.
I also asked some of your colleagues this question, but we've heard that China's race to space is also related to mineral rights. I'm quoting Brandon Weichert's Winning Space, and that supposedly there are vast quantities of minerals in space. And while the scope of this hearing was related to mineral access in the southwestern United States, are we doing anything to get ahead of China or circumnavigate their desire to gain mineral access in space?
Yeah, well, it's not just not mineral rights. They're on a race to be first in space, period, and dominate space. And as a matter of fact, if we're not careful, they will be back to the moon way before we get there. And the United States needs to keep pressing on our space industry, on NASA especially. You know, that's I sit on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee and chairman of the Subcommittee on Research and Technology. But that is a huge concern from the United States standpoint, that we have got to be dominant, not only here, but in space. And, you take some of the quantum technology, for instance, that is going on out there. If we don't keep pushing and make sure that we are first in quantum technology, then if China, who is outspending the entire world to develop that, they can knock down satellites in the snap of a finger.
Well, I really appreciate your answers today. Do you have time for one more?
Yeah, man. What you got?
All right. Well, just for the local people listening out there later this afternoon, is there anything that you'd like to mention to our listener audience that they could do? I know you gave sort of a call to action at the end of the hearing today.
I'm gonna tell you something. I've known this since I was a kid, but there is nothing that gets done in that town up there until the American people stand up and demand it. And that's what we need to happen right now. The House is passing good legislation. We are. And we're sending that legislation over to a black hole in the Senate. And if the American people will start standing up and demanding that we take up that legislation, or demand that we fix these problems that are causing people permitting problems out there, or just this overreach and overbearing regulations and rules from these federal agencies, you're going to see some things get done. But that's the only way that things actually happen in Washington, D.C., is when the American people stand up and demand it.
I really appreciate your time today, sir.
Thank you. Enjoy being out here, man.